Jax West from Steven Avery Project. MAM Goss. Open the vent in this room. So I don't think there's air conditioning in here because I'm like, oh my God, it's really warm up. Humidity here in Chicagoland is really, really bad. Oh, sorry. There was my boss texting me saying she saw the news on Marnie. I'm able to go live in the middle of the day here because I took the day off to go to Marnie Yang's court hearing. This is where the judge was going to rule. We had a stage 3 evidentiary hearing, and the judge was finally ruling on that. No, I didn't. That you see this, the side of the thing, whatever, who cares? I knew the judge was not going to rule in Marnie's favor even before going, hello, Raven. And I had even said to Marnie's dad as we were driving to the courthouse that it's head and heart. My heart, really wants Marnie to go home, but my head told me there's no way this judge is going to overturn anything. I hate that these cases go back to the judge that put them there. So it's very hard to overturn that. But I'm not going to continue talking about Marnie because I know when people tune in to Steven Avery stuff, they get upset when I talk about other cases. And we are done with reading my book that, I was sitting in my living room and just watching TV, getting sleepy. I'm sleepy right now. And it's like, oh, I could take a nap. But I'm like, oh, I should go read my book because I haven't had time to come on here. So my book, Wrongfully Abused, Making an Advocate for Steven Avery. I have this self-published on Amazon. This is my thoughts on the case, as well as what's happened to me in being an advocate for this case. And this was published in 2022. So I really need to write a sequel because things have happened since the end of this book. Let me get to where I left off in this. All right, so here's where we are in the book. As we all know, both guys are found guilty. They were tried for the same murder, but completely different scenarios. Weird. Brendan isn't eligible for parole until 2048. Then they talked about making a murderer. Wait. I've read all that. I have to skip over to here. Oh boy. Here we go. So we're on this page. This paragraph is where we are. When I was friends with Barb and Scott Toddock, I wrote this one I titled Brendan Dassey is Lost in Steven Avery's Shadow. This was written in May of 2016. This one is a little cringeworthy, but I have another that is even worse. I can't believe I ever defended Scott Toddock, but this is part of my history of the case, so I will share it. So here's what I wrote. Most people think of Steven Avery when they think about Netflix's hit documentary Making a Murderer that began airing in December 2015. If you're reading this article, then you are aware of the story, so there is no need for me to rehash it for you. While what has happened to Steven twice is incredibly sad, what has happened to Brendan Dassey is just as bad, if not worse. Brendan was just a sweet 16-year-old boy with a low IQ when he was questioned over and over by law enforcement officials about a missing girl. They questioned him without a lawyer or even a parent present. Brendan was like most kids. If an authority figure talks to you, then you must answer them. He didn't know any better. Many adults don't know any better for that matter. They told him he would get to leave if he just said what they wanted. They kept fishing, and Brendan kept trying to think up the things to say that would make them happy so he could get back to class. It is absolutely disgusting what Manitowoc has done to that poor boy. What I find just as infuriating is when you get done with watching Making a Murderer and you search the internet for anything you can on the case as you just want to know what wasn't included in the documentary and what do you find out about Brendan. Go Google his name. I will wait. You find articles on Steven Avery. Now go look for him on Wikipedia. Steven's page comes up. This case isn't just Steven Avery. Brendan Dassey was taken into custody at just 16 years old. He has been in prison for going on 10 years now. Why isn't there more out there about Brendan? Brendan is currently in Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. He is doing as well as he can there. He has a cellmate he likes who is helping him get into shape. Brendan enjoys getting letters from people, and he does the best he can to write everyone back. I will put at the end of this article how you can contact him yourself. In one of his letters to me, he told me a little bit about some of the things he likes. And here's the picture of Brendan when he graduated in prison. Favorite color, orange. Pokemon, Mew. Food, burgers. TV show, Arrow. Movies, Maze Runner. Wrestler, John Cena. Chip, Doritos. Snack, chocolate chip granola bars. Book, Graceling series by Kristen Kishore, if that's how you say her name. Season, fall. Holiday, 4th of July. It's next week. Or not even next week, it's Saturday. Today's Monday. Football team, Green Bay Packers. Video game, Any Need for Speed. His letters point out that he still is that sweet boy we saw in the documentary. He is thankful for the attention his case is getting now, and he is hopeful that there is an end to his incarceration in sight. He is stuck waiting as his lawyers filed for him to get a new trial around 9 months ago, and they are still waiting for the decision. It could be in 2 days. It could be in another 9 months. Our system is just so slow and is in desperate need of change. I did not know until I watched Making a Murderer that it wasn't illegal to question a minor without a lawyer or parent present. I was appalled to find out that it isn't illegal anywhere in the United States. So they can pull Brendan out of school, not tell his parents where he is, and ask him anything they want. That is unreal to me. We have already seen how Brendan was manipulated, and you just know if you didn't add that last part, they would just talk a kid into waiving their rights. We understand that it may be difficult to get an attorney to some areas in a timely manner, so they have to at least have a lawyer on Skype. When I wrote this, there was no Zoom, by the way, on Skype, or talk to them on the phone. They must have some contact with a lawyer, someone. They have a 22-year-old son. He's 33 now. And if he were brought in for questioning, I would much prefer him have an attorney in the room with him than his father or I. I don't know the law. I think I could be intimidated by law enforcement, or I could be tricked. You can say you wouldn't. People talk a big game all the time of, I would do this if they did that, but you truly don't know until you're in the situation. A lawyer knows what they are doing. But then you have the Len Kaczynskis out there who just plain suck. Strang and Buting talk all the time about how court-appointed lawyers don't make squat for the amount of work they do. So you're just going to get crappy representation who just want to get the case handled the quickest and easiest way possible. Meanwhile, the prosecution has thousands upon thousands of taxpayer dollars to spend on their experts and tests. As Steven says, poor people lose all the time. But the longest road begins with a single step. Do you want your child brought in and questioned without a lawyer present? So, why is it okay that it happened to Brendan? This is a picture that my husband made about Brendan, since Brendan loves wrestling, and Brendan signs his letters, the complete and innocent, after his conviction was overturned. And so he used, straight up John Cena stuff. And one of Brendan's slogans was from John Cena, I believe, the never give up. Another thing we are doing is a worldwide rally we are calling We Stand for Innocence. This is in support of both Brendan and Steven. We have many rallies scheduled across the United States on June 11th, as well as the UK, Ireland, and Australia have one scheduled on other days. I am organizing the Manitowoc rally. Manitowoc County is not being helpful, but this will happen no matter what. Come on, turn the page. There's a flyer that my husband had made. Brendan isn't the first child manipulated by law enforcement, and he wasn't the last. But we can do what we can to try to make sure it doesn't happen to any kids in the future. Please remember Brendan and don't let him be overshadowed by all the attention Steven Avery gets. Going off book here. So yeah, when I wrote that, there was nothing about Brendan at that time. It was very hard to find anything about Brendan. That was one of the conversations I had with his attorney, Laura Nyrider, because I asked her if I could interview Brendan, and she had said no. And I said, look, all I want to do is find out about Brendan. I'm not even going to talk to him about the case. And so that's how the letter happened, where I just asked him a bunch of questions that I just read in the article of favorite color, favorite this, favorite that, because I just wanted people to get more of a picture of who Brendan is. Now, there's been a ton of attention on Brendan, but sadly, Brendan's case has gone everywhere it could go, and there's not much hope for freeing Brendan. Okay. Some things I would force myself to watch or listen to and recap it to protect others from having to go through that torture themselves. One of those is when Kratz went on Dr. Drew's podcast. Both of them are pieces of smurf. This was in April of 2016. I read that Ken Kratz was on Dr. Drew's podcast talking about making a murderer. And since I am not able to review his wonderful speaking event he was scheduled to have next month in Rockford, Illinois, as it was canceled because no one was buying any tickets, I figured I might as well see what he had to say to Dr. Drew. Let me also say I am so disgusted with Dr. Drew. I have had my own website since 2000 that is devoted to reality TV. I've watched a lot of Dr. Drew. I always liked the man and thought he truly cared about people and was someone who would look at facts. I don't believe that anymore and am so disappointed in him. One of the things I cover on my website is Big Brother. I have been covering it since its first season. For those that don't know what that is, they put people in a house for 3 months and there are cameras where us crazy stalkers can watch them 24/7. I've been watching and transcribing this show for years, so I am a pretty fast typist. I treated the podcast like that. I listened to it and typed what Ken Kratz said. I didn't cover anything. I think I meant to say it didn't cover anything. I would nod off at times, and other times I would be in the fetal position rocking as his voice just creeps me out. But I got the highlights. If you want to listen for yourself, you can do so here, and I have a link. The first thing they talked about is Kratz' drug addiction. Kratz blamed the high profile case for taking drugs. He struggled when things went back to normal, had anxiety issues, used Xanax and Ambien. It got away from him. Then he started needing those things during his day. He could perform his job duties pretty well, but some of the other behaviors that occurred were from lowered inhibitions and his other personality and his narcissism. These are things that he said, by the way. It wasn't until after treatment, after this whole thing blew up, when he became suicidal and actually put a gun in his mouth. Sure, he did. He was in a dark place and is really fortunate to come out on the other side. He has sobriety of prescription drugs. He is in NA and SAA. He is a defense attorney now. Says it's not a whole lot different. When you're a prosecutor, you look for the weaknesses and holes in the case. His Xanax use wasn't really that much over the top. He wasn't using more than 2 milligrams a day. Dr. Drew said that is a big dose to be on every day, and you will have withdrawal after a week. Kratz said his prescription was for one, but he was self-medicating. He said he is not one to blame others like the doctors for not seeing his abuse, but they do hand it out like candy. He was having marital issues as well. The inhibitions seemed to melt away. It manifests itself in sexual marital affairs and hitting on women, eventually within his profession. Looking back, he thinks absolutely deplorable. Him and I will agree on. He was doing this to crime victims, and he was the chairman of Victims' Rights Board. Then he got involved in texting with a crime victim. It doesn't get much worse than that. What the hell was he thinking? There's no good decision making or upside to that. Your brain is really hijacked and you can't make any meaningful decisions with the front part of your brain, but with the pleasure center in the middle. It took him losing everything. He was able to keep the plate spinning in all his different lives pretty well. Attorneys are pretty good at multitasking. When you have a powerful job like district attorney, not many people will call you on it. They aren't doing you any favors by doing that. His behavior became more and more erratic and risk-taking, and it wasn't going to be a good ending. He is really fortunate it wasn't worse. He lost his career, basically everything. Whatever happened to him was from him having crashed from the craziness that was his life. There are 22 individuals in treatment at Hazleton, and when you talk about hypersexuality, it is such a secretive, shame-filled thing that you engage yourself in, but the people in treatment with him all had familiar stories. Doctors and CEOs, they all had very high-profile jobs. He came out of his fog when his director said, "Who are you?" He was the least well-known person in that group. Dr. Drew said Tiger Woods was in that facility. Oh, yeah, and we see how well he's done. Kratz is really proud of this. After his stint there were 8 to 10 of them that went through all this drama together, and they bonded. They did a support group every Saturday each other and continue their recovery program. You realize it's not just you, and you don't have to suffer anymore in isolation. Patrick R. Krill from Hazleton says it's nice to make Kratz's acquaintance and congratulates him on 5.5 years of sobriety. He says this is consistent with a lot of attorneys and judges in the country. They self-medicate to deal with their anxiety, and slowly it gets away from you. People around you turn a blind eye. Not only is it a boys will be boys atmosphere, but they are in their own glass house. Kratz said there is almost an institutional propping up of attorneys. What he has tried to do with his story in being very public is to reduce the shame and say if he can make it through the media storm that he did, and that there are others like him that are willing to help these professionals without judgment, and they don't have to lose everything. Since Making a Murderer came out, His Twitter, Facebook, and website were really attacked mercilessly, and his life was threatened. It was cyberbullying. So he doesn't have the access he would like to have with other citizens who have questions. He always prided himself of making himself available, yeah, to females. There were some troubling threats, not just to him, but his family and associates. He says to be targeted in such a direct and hate filled way for being part of that trial is a shame. Oh, hmm, hmm. Poor Kratz. You mean like how you targeted Steven and Brendan and did those horrible press conferences telling lies? Hmm. The one book they have signed to do with the publisher is the Avery book. His goal is to eventually write 3 different books. The Dassey case is every bit as interesting as the Avery case for different reasons. With the false confession and manipulation that is perceived as his own family sacrificed and the plea offer, he accepted that was thwarted because it would make Stephen's case more difficult. Brendan was given the opportunity to testify against his uncle, but because of his much less involvement in the series of crimes, he was offered to serve 15 years in prison. And he accepted that plea bargain, but it wasn't his attorneys who nixed the deal, but his mother and grandfather, urging him in calls not to accept it and to go to trial. And this was real disturbing calls that it would hurt Stephen's case. This family lived in almost like cult like existence on the salvage yard, with Stephen being the center of everything that went on. Brendan was much less involved, and as a prosecutor, he said, unfortunately, Brendan was made to choose a path that only led to life in prison. It's sad. It's not something you want to believe a mother or grandfather would engage in, but it happened. And it will be part of his book and part of the story as he finally gets to tell the other side and hopefully be able to show the general public the kind of evidence that was presented at the 7-week trial. The jury didn't have any trouble dispelling those and found them guilty. Dr. Drew said they were watching a television show and being a judge and jury based on that. Kratz said it was what was spoon-fed to you in the docudrama. They picked and chose the facts you got to see, and that's not all what the jury got to see. When you realize the editing and omission of evidence, it is really troubling and irresponsible on how that was shown. That they would call it a documentary when it is an advocacy piece. This may not be all of the evidence, but a relative sample of what the jury was shown and a good faith conclusion to what had happened. But when your design is not to tell the real story, but advocacy and to lead the audience to a specific conclusion that Avery was convicted of a wrongful conviction or there was police corruption. They weren't shy of talking about well thought of police officers without any proof behind it. Just casting them as the villains and didn't make it at all subtle that Kratz was the ringleader in all this. It's amazing to him that the prosecutor and the cops who worked to convict were really, in Kratz's opinion, a really dangerous psychopath here because the evidence pointed to that and they, in a very sly way, turned the tables and made Avery into a victim and the prosecution into the villain. Now, I have not read my book since I published it, so I don't know what I'm going to comment to that after this, but I'm still just going to pause here because, as I read it, my mind just goes and I want to say shit. The more you look into the case, as I did, the more you find that Steven and Brendan are innocent. So when you look at the things that happened in this case that was not in making a murderer, it just further points to innocence, not guilt. The documentarians were not making an advocacy piece. They had no clue when they started filming this what was going to happen. That's also why it is called making a murderer. You go into this thinking, or I went into it thinking, let's put it in my voice for how I personally took it. I went into it thinking that because it was called Making a Murderer. And when we were moving on to episode 2, that, oh my God, because this guy was wrongfully convicted and served 18 years for the Penny Bernstein case, now he's murdered somebody. And that's what the documentarians went into this thinking that happened. They followed the evidence. They wanted to talk to the prosecution. They wanted to talk to the Halbach family. They did not want to speak to them. So that's why you only have one side that talks to the cameras. And that's why you see Sweat's press conferences, or when Michael Halbach was doing a press conference. That was the only way the documentarians could get the other side into their documentary. So they covered all the sides they could. And this was 10 episodes. The first season was 10 episodes. The second one is 10 episodes. They can only put in so much. They can't put everything in there. So they included things in there that make Steven look bad. So this wasn't an advocacy piece just to try and show Steven like he's a saint or something. It clearly showed Steven's not a saint. I will tell you, Steven is not a saint. But that doesn't mean he murdered Teresa Halbach. Oh. Dr. Drew thinks Avery raped her and threw her in the car and hit her in the head and shot her in the car. There's no evidence of that. Kratz said Making a Murderer said we presented 2 theories, but he claims that's not true. It is true because Brendan was convicted on one scenario and Steven's convicted on the other. We said it happened in the garage. Avery shot Teresa Halbach on the garage floor. Kratz's theory was, and he never gets to give his theory, he can only talk about the evidence, but his theory was there was a tarp where this was happening on, and that would explain so much about where it happened, and there wouldn't be blood on the garage floor. Brendan said they threw her in her own SUV to decide what to do with her body. That was real consistent. We didn't know that until his statement why her blood was in her car. Not just where there's blood, but these pages are so hard to turn. But where there's not blood. It's on the side, but not on the carpet. So that suggests she was wrapped in a tarp and her bleeding head was against the side and no blood on the carpet itself. Sometimes you're not going to be able to answer all the questions or put all the pieces together. It's unfortunate. You don't know at the beginning. They didn't find her bones for the first 4 days. The arson investigator walked past the burn pit and saw it was charred bone. Cops had been walking. They didn't see it, but the arson investigator did. He knew what it looked like. It was happenstance. An arson investigator was there. It was fortuitous. It was a 38-acre crime scene. He said Avery didn't have the opportunity to smash up the car. It was by the car crusher, but it was a working business and there were people who worked there and people there all day, every day. The Monday afternoon it happened, and Saturday Avery went to the cottage with the family and had planned to come back that afternoon, and Kratz's theory was that would be the first time Avery would be on the property with the opportunity to crush the car. Avery hadn't been alone on the property to do it. Pause. If you murdered somebody and your home and business is a crime scene and the family that works and lives at the crime scene is going out of town, you would stay home and get rid of everything. Also, Steven could have done things in the middle of the night while people were home. There's back ways that he could have driven that RAV4 that he wouldn't have gone past anybody else's trailers, that he could have gotten into the salvage yard. So, no. The defense allowed making a murderer to describe Avery's prior history. Burning the cat, he described as hanging out with the wrong crowd. Avery soaked the cat in oil and gas and threw him on the fire. No, he actually did not. He was there. He didn't stop it. He might have even laughed at it, which is all still shitty and crappy, but he's not the one that murdered the cat. He's just the one that gets blamed for it. Some of the troubling facts they never tell you is the cat jumped out of the fire and Avery threw it back in the fire to watch it burn. That's a precursor to many individuals, mass murderers, and serial killers, what kind of process they have, their sadistic nature. It starts on animals. There were many crimes of violence, pointing firearms at people, running people off the road, and a couple rapes he was alleged to have done that the jury never heard about. When someone ends up in a rape lineup, it's not an accident they're in there. Avery had behaved up to that point. It's a real tragedy he was wrongfully convicted and had a legitimate claim of being wronged and then got out of prison and have that lawsuit pending and have a real chance to turn his life around, but had such an impact on so many people. But Kratz doesn't want us to forget about Teresa Halbach and her family. It shouldn't be relegated to a footnote. Every opportunity he gets to mention that, he takes it. Dr. Drew said he heard Avery was masturbating on people's cars. Kratz said he was convicted of it. That's when he drove that woman off the road. He wasn't convicted of that. They weren't just allegations. Dr. Drew said their IQ made it difficult. Kratz said Avery was very savvy. He was able to really avoid lots of apprehension and hiding of evidence and things like that. He couldn't hide everything. DNA eventually caught up with him. He suspects the 18 years Avery spent in prison that he learned very well. They had a cult-like existence. This family made up for each other's deficits. They would turn to this family system to survive, and Avery had his strengths and that he's quite charming. Dr. Drew said he thinks of fetal alcohol syndrome and wonders if that's what it is. Sorry, I keep rolling my eyes. So that was the end of that crap fest. Now time for my personal opinion. So does Kratz for him that he jumped at the opportunity to prosecute this big case where he soaked up every ounce of the limelight he could find, not one, but two cases, and that caused him so much trauma that he had to resort to drugs? Say what? That county was overwhelmingly anti-Netflix documentary. No one knew this story. The only people spoon-fed were the people of Manitowoc County by Kratz's and parroting what the prosecution told them. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Sorry for the language, but Kratz warrants that and so much more. So are we supposed to feel so bad for sweaty Kratz that after winning 2 high-profile cases and getting awards for it, that he had to turn to a life of pills that got him to prey on assault victims to victimize them a second time? Sorry, but the only people I feel bad for in that situation is the poor women who were forced to have sex with the prize. Why does this guy continue to utter such complete bullshit and anyone believes it? Wrong again, sweaty Kratz. He convicted Steven and Brendan using different circumstances. Yes, he is saying in both cases she was ultimately killed in the garage. But the story he tells leading up to the alleged murder is not the same. Steven was not convicted of rape. The story Kratz tries to sell is that Bobby Dassey saw Teresa go in Steven's trailer and he has that she was in there there is an auto trader on the desk. Funny, as both other customers also had the magazine in their homes. So was she killed there too? There's absolutely no evidence Teresa was in that trailer. None. No evidence Brendan was ever in that trailer. No evidence a rape ever occurred. What is the key phrase here? No evidence. Where I am really going to lose my shit is when he talks about the Avery family. I respect that the family doesn't want their loved ones to admit guilt when they're innocent. Steven always owns up to what he has done wrong, but he won't say he did something he didn't do. Brendan was just a scared boy who was manipulated by some bully cops since he was Steven's alibi and would say anything they wanted him to say and more. Brendan thought he was going back to class. He had no idea that was happening to him. If you ask Brendan, his story is always consistent. He got home from school, played video games, watched TV, etc. It's only when he is questioned multiple times for hours and told what to think and say does his story change. Even after O'Kelly told him what pictures to draw when he was told to write up his story, he still told the same one. When is his story not consistent? When he must lie. It's easy to remember to tell the truth. It's hard to remember a lie. This is all the thinking about Kratz I can do for the day. Please add your comments to this article. What do you have to say about Kratz's theory? Please remember to come back to freebrendan.org and visit the Facebook page where we keep you up to date on everything going on. We have some special things in the works too. Always remember that a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I know Bruce hates when I do that, LOL. Are you repulsed enough? I gave you a little buffer before this article that I am just so disgusted with myself for writing. It is titled, Who is Scott Taddock? From October 2016. This is not long before things between me and the Taddocks went to Smurf. Get a bucket, you may gag. I'm not looking forward to reading this. I was so snowed for a period of time. I am just like all of you reading this now. I watched Making a Murderer on Netflix and came away appalled that Steven and Brendan were framed for Teresa Halbach's alleged murder. I didn't just take what I saw as gospel. I went online and found every single thing I could about this tragedy and read it all. I have been to the salvage yard and walked the Pam Sturm path of God. I have stood behind Steven's garage where the alleged bonfire was. I have met with many of the family. I admin the Free Brendan Facebook page and recently been added as a moderator of the Justice for Brendan Dassey closed family Facebook group. So I am not just your average Making a Murderer watcher. I wasn't just convinced by a show. I am appalled at the accusations that have been thrown at Brendan's stepfather, Scott Taddock. It seems this will never go away, and people with their own questionable past and motives like to try to shift the blame to Scott. This is disgusting to me on so many levels. So I wanted to write a little something from the other side to talk about the Scott Taddock that I know. I first met Scott when I went to see Steven's lawyer, Strang and Buting, speak in Milwaukee. He was a little quiet and standoffish, but that is to be expected when the poor man has had to live for years with these horrible things being said about him. But he warmed up and was soon joking and laughing with me and my boyfriend. The next time was on one of my visits to the salvage yard. Scott and Barb were all smiles, and they were a pleasure to be around. The last time I saw him is when I was invited to his and Barb's home for me to moderate a Facebook Live event we did for the family Facebook group. People were able to submit questions in real time, and I would go through them and ask Scott, Barb, Pete, Brendan's dad, and the Dassey Taddock family spokesperson the questions they could answer. Obviously, they aren't allowed to talk about the case, etc. If you didn't see this event, then you missed out on something special. Brendan really has loving parents who care about him so much. You can also see how much all three of his parents get along. The three of them also regularly go visit Brendan together. The hardest part for me in moderating that was to not cry when Scott spoke about what he had been through. Puke. Scott broke down several times. He wasn't crying because, oh, poor him. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was genuinely upset about what has happened to Brendan, as well as another man in Manitowoc who has the name Scott Toddock. That the other man must deal with the accusations too and what it has done to his life. Do you honestly think that Barb would be with a man who is responsible in any way for her son being falsely imprisoned? Barb may be sweet and trusting, but she is far from stupid. Please don't mistake her Wisconsin accent for being gullible. Barb is also not a woman who is going to take abuse from any man. She was the only daughter with 3 brothers and then raised 4 boys herself. She stands up for herself and doesn't need a man to protect her. What about Pete? Do you think Brendan's father would be okay being around a man that had anything to do with putting his son in prison? These really are good people who got a raw deal. Why do people suspect Scott? When I looked through the 3 times he was interrogated over 4 months, starting 2 weeks after Teresa went missing, his timeline remains the same. All the times he says he went to the hospital, went hunting, picked up Barb, went back to the hospital, dropped Barb off, and Barb came to his home are the same. I see people are questioning the time he went hunting. That is the most optimum time to hunt. Now, I don't know anything about hunting, but what I do know is that Scott loves hunting. He does it quite regularly. So for me to relate, I will put it into something I do. I love going to the zoo and taking pictures. I have a membership. I don't just go once a year, I go every week. When I go, I don't walk the whole zoo each time. I go for an hour and then go home. I will be back soon, so there is no need to fit it all in at once. Same goes for Scott in hunting. He goes a lot. He enjoys it. He goes when he can. He visited his mom and knew he was getting Barb to go visit after she got off work. He took the opportunity to hunt for a little while. It's right by his house, too. I don't see why that seems so nefarious. He went hunting for a couple hours. He was picking Barb up around 5, so therefore he couldn't go hunting at dusk. It's not rocket science. The bonfire. The first time Scott was questioned, he didn't even mention a fire. He didn't say anything about it until questioned at the end of November. Why does everyone believe that Brendan was coerced into incriminating himself, and no one considers for a second that anyone else in the family was led to say things to incriminate Steven as well? Every single member of that family that was questioned was manipulated. When is Scott's story the same? When he can just tell the truth of the times he did things and what he did. When does it vary? When they want him to talk about the bonfire. How big was the bonfire? Was it 30 feet? Was it 10 feet? Was there even a fire on Halloween of 2005? I told you I have been to where the bonfire was. The evidence pictures were done quite creatively to make it seem like the fire was farther away from the garage than what it was. It was really, really close. The garage is built out of particle board. If there was a fire 10 feet tall, that garage would go up. The propane tank was nearby on the other side. The fire just didn't happen as the prosecution leads people to believe. Also, the positioning of Steven's garage from Barb's driveway doesn't give you a great view of the fire pit. Someone answer me why. Why is someone so hellbent on implicating Scott? I have seen them say that Barb was also part of setting up Brendan. That is just absolute craziness. Tell me what would be Scott's motive to do this. I can tell you now. You need to consider the source. Who is that person connected to, and what are their motivations to try to shift the focus onto Barb and Scott? You also need to be mindful of the person's credibility who is making the accusations. I know Scott, and he is a caring, loving man. He loves Brendan. He visits him regularly. Brendan loves Scott. There is nothing remotely truthful in any claim that Scott had anything to do with this. He has been through enough, and it is time people moved along. Kathleen Zellner made it clear that no one in the family is responsible. She has also not asked Scott to do any testing recently or ever. Just another lie to make Scott look suspicious. There are so many places on the internet that does nothing but spew lies and hatred about this case and this family. And now I was injecting some comments into the article that I had written, where I say, I seriously need a Silkwood shower after reading that. I gave that guy a chance, but the more I dug into the case, the more things just didn't add up to Scott's testimony being truthful. I saw firsthand what happens when Scott gets angry. I have heard his threats against many people, myself included. I will get into that later. Let's get into a little palate cleansing before I delve into all the drama behind the scenes. I have just a few things left that I've written over the years. I already showed you my review of Buting's book. Here is my review of John Ferrick's book, Wrecking Crew, which I have signed copies up there. John Ferrick used to be a journalist in Wisconsin, so he is quite knowledgeable on the Steven Avery case. He now lives back in his hometown in Illinois, but that didn't get this case out of his mind. He just released a book called Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Steven Avery on November 20th, 2018. You can purchase it on Amazon here, and I have the link. I downloaded it at 12:10 a.m. on the release day. Read it until I fell asleep around 2:30 a.m. Woke up at 6 a.m. and finished it around 9 a.m. This review isn't going to give you any spoilers. You need to read the book yourself to get those. For those that have been following the case since Making a Murderer was released, and I don't just mean people who watched a documentary, but those who have fully researched the case and soaked up everything they could find on StevenAveryCase.org, there really isn't much in this book we didn't know. There are a couple good tidbits in there. This book is for those that don't read transcripts and follow Kathleen Zellner's filings, etc. It lays it all out there. Everything we have been saying, but the ignorant refuse to see it. The book does begin by talking about Teresa's life in a way that I know the guilters will get in an uproar about, but it's the truth. It just goes to show that there were so many other things that should have been investigated, but weren't. It doesn't condemn Teresa. She was a young, single girl, free to live her life how she wanted. I'm sure there are plenty of people, though, who have never heard any of it, and it will blow them away. The book isn't kind to the key players that have framed Steven, much to my delight. Sweat Ken Kratz is a despicable man who used his own perverted mind to dream up the scenario of what he alleged Steven and Brenda did to Teresa without an ounce of evidence. Ferrick goes into detail all of Sweaty's misdeeds during the trial, his sexting and abuse of battered women, and his desperate attempts to remain relevant during the Making a Murderer resurgence. Sweaty may have not been the one who kicked off this frame job, but he surely becomes the biggest villain in this book. One of the hard things to follow in this case is just how so many of the people involved are connected. Ferrick lays that all out there. It's just crazy how all the law enforcement involved in this have so many conflicts that they should not have been allowed anywhere near this case. Finally, who actually killed Teresa Halbach? All the evidence points to Bobby Dassey, who was Sweaty's star witness. This book shows just why Bobby is the person that should have been looked at and be the one in prison today, followed by his now stepfather, Scott Toddock. They just happen to be each other's alibis too, but when you investigate it, it's clear they are lying. There are a lot of books out there on this case by people just trying to make a buck, but this is the first one to actually give you the facts of the case. I highly recommend anyone who is interested in this case to pick up a copy of Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Steven Avery. Then make sure you continue following the case with us at Steven Avery Project. You can get all the latest on our Facebook page here. And we have a closed group called MAM Gossip, where we get more in depth on this case and others here. We are also on Twitter here. You can donate straight to Kathleen Zellner for his legal defense here. And since I just talked about it, this is the book I was just talking about. Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Steven Avery. What are... This one is the anniversary edition. That's why I've got things marked on there. So this was the 5-year anniversary edition where bonus stuff, new stuff was in there. And then this one then, then this one is the original. And he signed it. Okay, back to my book. Every time there's a filing, I go live on Steven Avery Project and read it for those who aren't able to, and we discuss. There are lots of numbers for exhibits. One that is there a lot is 8675. I can't ever read that number and not think of the song 8675309, Jenny. I have a horrible singing voice, yet must sing it every time. One day I was coming up with new lyrics for it. I am such a dope, but here is what I wrote. I don't even remember this. Oh my God, this is going to be corny and stupid, but I'm going to read it to you and embarrass myself even further. So it's titled 8675 Why You Lyin'. I'm not singing it. Sweaty sweat, who can you lie to? You lie to anyone you can tell lies to. I know you think we're like the others before, who saw your sex and number on the call. Sweaty, we found the number. You're just a sweaty swine. Sweaty, don't hide that number. 8675 Why You Lyin'. I'm not going to repeat it over and over again like it is in the chorus. Sweaty, sweaty, not the prize for me. Your constant screw-ups make me so happy. You tried to hide the bones, but they were preserved. You tried to hide the bones, but you will be served. Sweaty, we found your number. You're just a sweaty swine. Sweaty, don't hide that number. 8675 Why You Lyin'. We got it. We got it. We got it. We found the number in the logs. We got it. We got it. We got it. For a good time. For a good time, call KZ. So now it's just repeating chorus. I'm not going to read it again. And then the last verse is sweaty, sweaty, who can you lie to? For the prize of a swine, we can always laugh at you. All right. So this chapter is called Free Melissa Kaluzinski. So Melissa has become family to me over the years that I've been visiting her. She is also represented by Kathleen Zellner. And I really think more people should care about her case. And so anytime I can advocate for Melissa, I will. So I snuck in a small chapter in this book on Melissa's case. And I am going to read that for you. I mentioned Melissa earlier, and now I'm going to devote a whole chapter to Melissa. Yes, it has nothing to do with the Steven Avery case, but I wouldn't know Melissa or her case if I hadn't got involved in Making a Murderer World. I get so annoyed when I mention Melissa Kaluzinski or any other case, and people will ask, what does this have to do with Steven? Honestly, it makes me think the asker is an extremely ignorant person. I am sorry. No, I am not. But the world doesn't revolve around Steven Avery. There are countless other people who are in prison that are innocent. They just haven't been lucky enough for Netflix to make a documentary on their story that becomes a huge international sensation. But all these cases deserve some attention. I'm going to give some to Melissa now. If you don't care, then skip this chapter. But know that I am judging you. While advocating for Steven and Brendan before I took over Steven Avery Project, I was friends with the moderators of Steven Avery Project. They had been talking to the girlfriend of this guy who was in prison. His wife had accused him of rape. The girlfriend was looking for help with the case. The moderator suggested me, as it is an Illinois case. Kathleen Zellner's firm represents him. I was put in contact with the girlfriend, and she wanted me to do social media stuff, write articles, and things like that. I attended his hearing and met Paul Kaluzinski there. His daughter is in prison for a murder she didn't commit, and she is also represented by Kathleen Zellner. These two families were now helping each other out, as you don't know what it's truly like to have an innocent loved one in prison unless you are experiencing that also. In talking to Paul, he wanted me to help and advocate for his daughter, Melissa, too. What does an advocate do? You just basically help the family out however you can. It's not a job. You aren't paid. There are no set hours. You're just trying to make things easier for both the inmate and the family. Paul wanted me to help on Melissa's social media stuff and had his sister add me as an admin. I don't really do anything though, as Melissa's aunt, who started the social media pages, has it all covered. Paul wanted me to be able to do live videos on there. Now I had to do my own investigating into the case, see where it took me. Would I think she was guilty or innocent? It is important to me to look at everything I can find. I am not just going to listen to the inmate or their family. There could be obvious bias there. There are two 48 hours episodes on Melissa's case. Now there's 3 since I've written this. Both are done by Erin Moriarty, who has become a good friend of Kathleen Zellner's. The episodes are called Blaming Melissa and Fight for Melissa. One is an update years after the first one was done. You can find these episodes on YouTube or from Kathleen Zellner's website, where she has a page for Melissa Kaluzinski's case. Melissa was just a 22-year-old working at a daycare facility also worked at. Melissa was in the top. At one point during the day, she saw that a 17-month-old boy was lethargic, turning blue, and had foam coming out of his mouth. She called for help. Her sister came in and started CPR. An ambulance brought him to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. All the employees of the daycare were taken in for questioning. They were split up. Melissa was questioned, where she tells what happened, but that wasn't good enough for the Lake County major. They keep pushing. Need her to say it. Melissa says over and over anything. The cops just keep pushing and lying. They say the boy's skull was cracked. The boy was a known headbanger when he would have tantrums. Melissa mentioned that. The cops say they know this was something that was done to him. They are finally able to convince Melissa to say it was. That wasn't good enough either. They say a drop. They wanted Melissa. See, I'm getting angry, and so now I'm starting to sweat even more. I'm getting heated because this pisses me off so much. They say a drop wouldn't have enough force. They wanted Melissa to show them how she threw him to the ground. The cops show her first and then have her demonstrate it. You can find her interrogation online too, but sadly, and not surprisingly, can't get the whole thing. For some reason, they didn't record the whole course confession. Shocker. Melissa thought if she just said what they wanted her to, she would get to go home to her parents and her puppy, Oreo. Just like Brendan Dassey, she was tricked into saying she committed a murder. She has been in custody ever since that day. Melissa has been in prison over 12 years now. Now it's 17. Just like the Avery Dassey cases, there are all kinds of corruption and fake evidence to frame the innocents. The alleged x-ray of the boy's skull was not able to be opened unless you had such and such program. The picture couldn't show you anything. Yet so-called medical experts testified that the boy's skull was fractured and there was also blood. Years later, the real x-ray was discovered. When you look at that, you don't see any fracture, and you can see the skull looks like a light bulb. Giant. I always say that when I tell people this story. The poor boy's brain had been swelling for who knows how long, and that is what killed him. Even if Melissa had accidentally dropped him or even thrown him to the ground, his brain wouldn't swell like that immediately to kill him. Here's pictures of the 2 different x-rays. Weeks prior to this incident, the boy had come to the daycare with a bump on his head. The daycare wouldn't let him in without a doctor's note. Obviously, they didn't want to be held liable for this injury. When this happened, Melissa didn't even work at that location. She was with the daycare, but not that facility. So even if people claim that he got the injury then that caused the swelling, it couldn't have been done by Melissa Kaluzinski. When a new coroner got elected, he investigated this case. He then changed the cause of death on the death certificate from murder to undetermined. Dr. Rudd said there wasn't any fracture, and the boy died from his brain swelling. What happened to the coroner for him going against what the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force and then State's Attorney Neerheim? You must be elected to be coroner. Every campaign starts with the candidates having to get X number of signatures on their petition to run. Democrats and Republicans must get one total. Independents must get more. That's one of the reasons it is important to get a party's nomination. All the signatures need to be notarized, each page. The candidate must be there when this is done. All candidates know if you need this many signatures, then your goal is to get at least twice that. Both sides play games and contest signatures and get them thrown off the petition. Dr. Rudd was accused of not being present when the signatures were notarized. That is actually illegal, but this game is always played and nothing is done about it. But in this case, they went after Dr. Rudd. Dr. Rudd admitted the error and offered to have all his signatures tossed and start over. Not good enough. He offered to run as an independent, so he would have to get even more. Not good enough. Lake County prosecuted Dr. Rudd and he was found guilty. Due to that, he can no longer be coroner. Does this sound familiar? The coroner in Steven's case wasn't even allowed on the alleged crime scene and was threatened to be put in jail if she violated it. Coroners are not law enforcement. They are supposed to be the voice of the dead. They only care about finding out what happened to the person to give their family justice and closure. But when you have a corrupt legal system that just want to close the case and they don't care about the victim or their family, then innocent people go to prison. The Kaluzinski family has welcomed me with open arms. It has been the complete opposite from the Averys. Until COVID hit, I was visiting Melissa twice a month, which is a 2.5-hour drive for me one way. During the year and a half, the prison was closed due to the pandemic. Melissa and I would email like every other day, still do. When the prison opened back up in June of 2021, I went down to visit and now go only once a month currently. I already showed you a picture of my first visit with Melissa as I was wearing an Avery shirt. Here are a few of my other visits with her. When Melissa's case went to court, Aaron Moriarty came to film it to use in a future episode on Melissa's case. I took a picture of her with Paul Kaluzinski, Melissa's dad. That's what this picture is. If you would like to write to Melissa or donate to her case, you can do so here. And then I got the graphic that we always post. Thank you for giving me a little time to take a little of your time to talk about this case. Melissa is the sweetest thing ever and is very important to me. There is so much more than what I talked about here that proves her innocence. But this isn't a book on her case, and I just wanted to give you some key points. You know what? I think I'm going to end this here. And there's not that much left. But the next chapter is no good deed goes unpunished. And that's all the juicy juice. Yeah. So that's going to be the cliffhanger. Maybe. Hold on. Let me see here. Yeah. How long have I been doing this? Only an hour? All right. I'm just going to read it because we'll just finish the book now. Going from the Kaluzinskis back to the Avery Dassey families is a complete switch. The Kaluzinskis are nice, loving, and appreciative. The Avery Dasseys make the case all about them and how they can get money and attention out of the supporters. If you don't drink the follow facts, and it was not Kool-Aid, they do whatever they can to destroy you. I have talked a little about what I've experienced in my 6 years advocating for this case, but let's dive into it. I first just wanted to find out what was going on with the case today. From there, I became friendly with some of the family. Carla, Stephen's niece, and Brendan's cousin is who I first bonded with. I really thought of her as my friend. I visited her house. She came to mine. I already talked about what went wrong due to me not just following her orders for the rally I was organizing. She has had her people after me ever since. I was then friendly with Barb and Gulp Scott. I already went into what went wrong there too when Barb got into a junior high fight with another girl as she wanted to be her only friend. So they turned on me for that. So ridiculous. I have been threatened by Scott Toddock, Earl Avery, and Chuck Avery. Barb Toddock will text me out of the blue and ask me to stop posting that Bobby and Scott are guilty. But then she will block me after she sends the message so I can't respond. At times, she will post something on Steven Avery project. This one is my absolute favorite. And I've got a screenshot. Duck you, Jax. People who are where I was once upon a time and feel sympathy for the family look at me as the enemy. Awful things get posted about me. People claim I am the one here for money and fame when I have done nothing of the sort. I started writing this book back in 2016 and then stopped as I am so hesitant to put anything out as I know it will get people to think it's proof they were right. But I will do something that no one who has written a book on this case has done. I will give a portion of the proceeds to Stephen. Do I have to? No, as this book isn't on Stephen, but rather my experience around the case. But I wouldn't have the experience if not for the tragic life Stephen has had to endure. So if this book makes money, I will happily give a percentage to him. How much? I don't know. I don't know what the costs are going to be for me to even put this out and if it will even sell. But I will definitely share the wealth. There's been no wealth. This book's hardly sold. Many people have written books on this case, lawyers and fans. One fan messaged Steven Avery Project and told me Steven wants me to promote the book on the page. I was talking to Steven at that time, so I said if Steven wants me to, he can tell me himself. I already knew that this particular person was bad news and wanted nothing to do with them. The next time I talked to Steven, I asked him. Steven's response was, quote, "Am I getting money from this book? No? Then no," unquote. Then he laughed. When the guy pestered me again, I told him Steven said no. The guy then, and I'm not going to smurf this word as I think it is important for you to know what he said. So if you're offended by language or there's children in the room, warning. He called me a cunt and said he was going to punch me in the face. That guy to this day pesters me. He just used one of his fake Facebook accounts over the weekend to post something on my personal page. This guy regularly preys on female supporters and sends them dick pics. And when they turn him down, he calls them names and threatens them. Another guy, a guilter, used to send me nasty messages. One day he told me he knew where I lived and that I was going to send me something very special. It was quite ominous. I didn't care, but I was friends with Barb at that time, and she flipped out and made me report it to the police. They then reached out to him, as I knew his name and that he lived in Boston. He hasn't reached out to me directly since, but he still posts about me on Twitter. Someone even started a Facebook page about me. I can't remember for sure what it was called, something like Jax West Making a Fraudster. They changed the name a couple times. Facebook told me that Earl Avery started the page, believe it or not. Then the page came down and someone else put it back up. This person has the initials KV, according to Facebook. Oh, I know who it is, but I am not putting any names other than the Avery Dassey family members in this book. But I am sure they will read this and they know what they've done. People are surprised the most that most of this stuff doesn't bother me in the slightest. One, I know I'm a bitch. I totally understand if people don't like me. I get it. And two, I must care about you to care about what your opinion is of me. Why would I care what an Avery or a Tadek or their fans have to say about me? I couldn't care less. I don't care if Steven likes me or not either, or Brendan. I believe in their innocence and I am here if they need anything. But I am not going to pretend that their family are good people that even remotely care about their freedom. When this book comes out, I will get hit all over again. The greatest hits will be played all over again. But I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. Many of the people who come to Steven Avery Project and MAM Gossip do care, and I have a microphone and you don't, so you will listen to every word I have to say. I actually think my haters watch what I do more than the supporters. Haha. No matter what I am put through, it is nothing compared to what Steven and Brendan have had to live through. There's just no comparison. If my pages can do anything to help their cases in any way, it is all worth it. We get witnesses who come forward with new information, supporters who have dug through all the evidence and found things that may have been overlooked. You just don't know. I will keep going until they are freed, no matter what their family and their fans try to do to me. Once the guys go home, then I will use Steven Avery Project to shine a light on different cases. And now this chapter is called August 2021. As I write this now, it is August 16, 2021. I started this book in the summer of 2016. I haven't touched it in years, but the last 3 weeks I've made a point of trying to write at least 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. I am sure more things will develop with this case and my involvement with it once I stop typing, so maybe there will be a sequel. Where do things stand currently? Sadly, Steven's mother, Dolores, passed away on July 8, 2021. Early that day, Steven Avery Project got a message from someone I don't know, but recognized the name as someone I know talks to Steven. They told me that Dolores had passed away that day, and Steven wanted me to post that, and that he is sure that she died of a broken heart because the family took her away from him. I didn't know if it was true or not, but I posted it, but also said I didn't know if it was true. I emailed Kathleen Zellner asking if it was true. I emailed her the same things a few years prior when a rumor that she had died came out, and thankfully it wasn't true then. About 20 minutes later, Kathleen tweeted that Dolores had died, and she emailed me back saying it was true and that she tweeted it. It made me so unbelievably sad. I didn't know Dolores well, only met her twice and talked to her on the phone once. I just saw her as a mom who didn't give up on her son. Dolores didn't make the case about her like Barb and Carla do. Dolores just wanted Steven home. All Steven wanted was to be with his parents. Now that was taken from him. But it turns out it was even worse than that. The Averys didn't hesitate to get out into the media and try to profit off Dolores' death. They had fundraiser posts like they've done a bazillion times before. I then got another message that this person was relaying to me for Steven, that he wanted me to tell people not to give his family any money that they claim was going to pay for his mom's services. He said his dad had made the arrangement years ago for both he and his wife. It was all paid for. Plus, Dolores was being cremated and there was no wake or funeral. The Averys gave themselves a party and had about 40 people there, and they used that as an excuse for people to give them money. Steven was appalled, and so was I. I made the same post I have made repeatedly, telling people if they want to give money to this case, then put it in Steven's commissary or give it to Kathleen Zellner for legal expenses. Carla tried to use that against Steven and claimed Steven was the one trying to make money off Dolores' death. Sorry, dear. And I know you're reading this or watching this. Hi, Carla. I'm the one that said that, and Steven had nothing to do with it. Earl Avery talked to the press about his mom's death and said she had been in hospice for 3 weeks and that Steven hadn't talked to her in 8 or 9 months. That sent me over the edge when I read that. I knew they had put Dolores in a home a year ago or so due to her dementia, but I had no idea they cut off all contact. This family does everything they can to punish Stephen personally while publicly pretending to advocate for him so they can profit off the case. It makes me sick. The family had gone so far as to take Stephen to court trying to get a restraining order so he couldn't talk to Dolores since Kayla Avery worked at the home. Then they said they were removing her from that home and putting her somewhere else where Stephen couldn't find her. They really didn't move her, but just let Stephen think that. Then Carla plays semantics, now claiming she was in the same place and he could have found her if he wanted. She also tries to use COVID as an excuse. Nice try, dear. You selfish smurfs separated Stephen and Dolores for the last year of her life. Hope you're proud of yourselves. Stephen did call me once in July. That is the only call so far as I write this. He was doing okay since the death of his mom. He talked about the case some. We didn't talk at all about why he stopped calling me the last few years. I just figure if he wants to talk about it, he can bring it up. He knows where I stand on his family and Sandy and many of the others who have inserted themselves into his business. I don't need to harp on him. It's his life, and he is free to have in it whomever he wants. I have been told Stephen says he doesn't, quote, care for me, unquote, but knows I am the biggest support system he has and can get the word out to the most people. So he is basically using me, which is fine. Again, I am just here doing whatever I can to help him and his case. This coming weekend, we are doing a memorial for Dolores at Stephen's prison on her birthday, August 20th, and then a rally for Stephen the next day. We had a rally for Stephen at Waupun last year, and I didn't have any contact with Stephen then, so no idea if he would approve it or not. We had originally scheduled to do another for him in July, but then after he was so upset at everything his family was doing, I decided to cancel it. Plus, I had Lollapalooza tickets for the weekend, LOL. Then Stephen told me he wanted me to do another rally at the prison. One of the MAM gossip members suggested the memorial on Dolores' birthday, too. I don't know if we will get a decent turnout or not. Carla and her minions tried to sabotage it by calling the hotels and telling them lies about our group, etc. Always drama. Nevertheless, we will persist. Next chapter, Who Killed Teresa Buck? I will close going over my theory of what happened to Teresa Halbach. Remember, I go off the evidence. Stephen called Auto Trader to schedule someone to come out to take a picture of Barb's van she wanted sold. Stephen offered to do it as he is home. He has sold a bunch of cars, and he has dealt with the magazine before. He told Auto Trader to send a girl who has come before, as he liked the work she had done previously, and why wouldn't you want the same person? Whether Stephen was the second or last stop, I don't know for sure. Bobby Dassey knew she was coming that day. He always commented to Stephen in the past when she had been there, so he was watching for her. He knew in advance this was happening as Barb told her boys to get the van ready to sell. The boys were pissed about it too, as they thought they would get to keep the van for their own use. I think Bobby followed her and got her to stop under the guise of a hustle shot. Did he ask her on a date? Make a move on her? Did she turn him down? Is that what caused him to strike her? That we just don't know. But Teresa's cell phone pinged off a tower by the Cuss Road dead end and not the salvage yard. We know she left due to that, and there are witnesses that saw her leave, including Bobby, who told both his brother Brian and his mother that he saw her leave. His brother Blaine said he saw Bobby driving what could have been Teresa's vehicle. A witness has come forward that they saw Bobby pushing the car onto the property in the morning on November 5th, the day the car was found. What Bobby did to Teresa, I do not know, and I am not going to make up theories like Sweaty Sweat does. But whatever it was, he did it, with an assist from Scott Taddock. Did Scott Sikiki Taddock take her body to his work and put her in his smelter? Did they burn her in the Manitowoc gravel pit and then tried to plant bones and evidence at Stevens? Or was it Manitowoc Sheriff's Department who planted those? MCSD planted the key and Teresa's DNA on the magic bullet. Who planted Steven's alleged blood and sweat DNA in the car? I am not sure on that. What I know is Sherry Culhane is suspect, so anything that comes out of that lab is reasonable doubt. I don't know if any of it is really Steven's blood or DNA or even Teresa's bones, but this is what happens when you're the little boy who cried wolf. By having the same players from his first wrongful conviction involved in this case, it taints everything. I believe Brendan is completely innocent. Kayla wanted attention and made up this lie of things she claimed Brendan told her so she could get into the spotlight. I think they just wanted to break Steven's alibi and initially just wanted Brendan to give a window that he wasn't with Steven or have him lie and say he saw something he didn't. Since Brendan can't pick up on social cues, he then mistakenly incriminates himself. Fassbender and Dietering need to create evidence to make Steven guilty, and now they had to take this boy down to do it. I don't know how they sleep at night. It's not like they actually think Steven is guilty or even Brendan. They know they're innocent, but they are just protecting their blue line. Sigh. Ugh. I don't think Barb was a part of framing Steven. I think she has kept her head in the sand and fingers in her ears. She has done everything possible to not know the truth. I think deep down she knows something isn't right and that she thought Brendan, being a minor, meant he would be released when he was 18 if he was found guilty. So she let it happen to protect Bobby. She married Scott right away to protect herself from having to testify against him. She was able to buy a new house and get out of a drug charge. While she has benefited over and over again, Brendan sits in prison. After Dolores died, many of the Averys made posts on their social media claiming Steven is guilty. Carla has made threats of releasing some phone calls that is assumed to be the last call Steven got to have with his mom before they yanked her away. Carla claims that Steven upset Dolores, so they had to do this. No, she had dementia. She's going to get upset at things. Then she will also forget that she was upset. Steven was also upset as his mom is slipping away and the family is trying to keep them apart. He had every right to be upset. I'm sure he also didn't completely understand what Dolores was going through. Someone should have taken the time to explain it. That's what a loving family would have done. Now I just hope that Steven can be released before his dad dies. I know his health isn't great and he has a hard time hearing, so phone calls aren't really a possibility. Really, the only way Steven can have contact with his dad would be to go home. The driving to the prison and sitting in those horrible chairs aren't good for Alan. It's just really sad. And now we know that it's gotten even worse. I will keep following the case and doing Facebook Live events. Well, actually, now it's YouTube since Facebook deletes them. On the Steven Avery Project, MAM Gossip, and Justice with Jax. If Steven gets a hearing or a new trial, I'm going to do my best to be there. I have been wrongfully abused by the Making a Murderer community, but I am not going anywhere. And the rest of my book is some of the pictures I have taken. So this picture is from my first trip to the salvage yard in January 2016. And I have that sign now. It's actually right there, the no trespassing. The infamous sign that everyone wants their picture taken at. Notice the blue ribbons. I assume someone did that for Teresa Hallbach. This is from my second trip to the salvage yard in April of 2016. This is where the RAV4 was found, right on the other side of that berm. On the left is the quarry. This is what you see on the other side of that berm, this big, huge quarry that has water like that. Plenty of places you could hide stuff that would never be found. This is the little road at the end of the salvage yard that the RAV4 was from the other end of it. Steven's trailer and garage. Behind Steven's garage where the alleged fire was. I took this from where Barb's van had been parked. You see Barb and Chuck in this picture. That is the trailer Barb had lived in, but Chuck lives in now. This is me standing in the spot the van had been parked and looking down Avery Road towards where the bus stop was. You cannot see the mailboxes. Therefore, there is no way the bus driver saw Teresa Halbach by that van that day. This is that picture. No way. Now, this is July 2022. I must do yet another update chapter, as this book has taken me longer than I anticipated to finish. I got done writing it in August of 2021, and then I gave it to a friend who is an editor to clean up my bad grammar. She didn't want to do it electronically and instead wanted a printed copy. Luckily, my husband, who is referred to as my boyfriend all over the book, but we got married in June of 2021, owns a print shop, so he printed a copy for her. She had it for months and then finally just gave it back to me when she said she wasn't going to have the time to finish editing it. She had taken a red pen to around half of the book for where I needed to make corrections. I started doing that a few months ago and then got busy, so didn't touch it for months. Today, I finally finished making the corrections she wanted and then tried to clean up the second half myself. Sadly, there is nothing to update on Steven's case. Kathleen Zellner tweeted a few months ago that she was going to be filing something on his case, but nothing has happened. She is working on another case, so I don't know if that is what has put off Steven's filing or what, so we just wait. Steven was recently moved to a new prison. Fox Lake Correctional is only about 15 minutes away from the maximum security prison Steven had been in. The Wisconsin prisons are not allowing the inmates to directly receive their mail anymore. It now goes somewhere out of state, and then the inmates are sent it electronically. That has caused a lot of confusion when we post on Steven Avery Project how people can write to him, and they see the address as Maryland instead of Wisconsin. If you would like to write to Steven, you can send it to Steven Avery, number 122987, Fox Lake Correctional Institution, P.O. Box 189, Phoenix, Maryland 21131. I haven't heard from Steven since July of 2021 after his mom died. There are some women who do talk to him, and then they message Steven Avery Project to pass on things from him, or they post directly on our pages and groups. I know Steven has been manipulated by people into believing lies about me, and that is fine. Steven doesn't have to like me for me to know he is innocent and believe he should be free. I am continuing to fight for his innocence. I still talk to Melissa Kaluzinski regularly, as well as visit her once a month when the prison isn't locked down. Melissa is also just waiting for Kathleen Zellner to file something for her case, or for the court to just realize that she is innocent and let her go. I finally got a tattoo for Melissa, as she and I both love butterflies and she is a talented artist. I told her forever go on the space I have left on my arm. She sent me a drawing of that and another butterfly that is called a Melissa Blue for my birthday a year ago. My tattoo artist finally had an opening last month, so I got the monarch and I have an appointment in December to get the other one. Are her drawings. There's the tattoos. I watch other true crime cases and then talk about it on either the Justice with Jack's Facebook page and group or the YouTube channel. For a while, I was doing unique, but I get busy or lazy and slack off. If you ever feel the need to reach out to me, you can email justicewithjax@gmail.com. Investigation continues. August 2022. I thought I was done, but nope, here's yet one more chapter. I got done editing the book and have been waiting on my husband to make the cover for it. This cover. On August 16, 2022, Kathleen Zellner filed another brief for Steven Avery. I just got done writing a summary for it for people who don't want to read the entire filing or sit through the 3.5 video I did reading it. So here is that article. Steven Avery, 8/16/2022 filing summary by Jax West of Steven Avery Project. Stephen Avery's attorney, Kathleen Zellner, filed for the third time for him on August 16, 2022. Much of what was in that are things she had in a prior briefing that you can read here and a link to it. But you can go to her website, KathleenTZellner.com, and she has links to all of her filings. Hello, Anonymous. It has even more evidence to back up what she told the court last time that shows that Stephen Avery should, at the very least, get a new trial. His supporters know that he should be let go immediately, and Wisconsin should now be named Averyland, but I digress. I have gone live on the Justice with Jack's YouTube channel where I read and discussed the briefing. You can watch it yourself here, and you can find that in here on YouTube. For those that don't have 3.5 hours to spare or just want a much shorter summary, then read on. I'm going to read through the briefing and just summarize it as I go, the things that are of significance or what I would like to bitch about or explain. There are 2 new witnesses to back up the claims made in the prior filing. One is the now ex-girlfriend of the paper delivery person who says they saw Bobby Dassey and some other guy pushing the RAV4 towards the junkyard. The other is Bobby's friend, who was asked if he was the other person pushing the car with Bobby, and his response is, "I don't remember." Stephen's original trial said that his defense team could not introduce other suspects. That is that whole Denny motion thing we constantly hear about. The only way to talk about other suspects was to have a motive. Yet, Stephen was prosecuted without there being a motive. But whatever. There were plenty of other people at the Avery salvage yard on October 31, 2005, who have sketchy histories, like Stephen's brothers, who weren't even looked at. It is a working business that was open that day. Bobby Dassey was obsessed with Teresa Halbach, who had been there a few times previously to take pictures of cars Stephen was selling, and he would always comment about her to Stephen. Bobby was never looked at and was the state's star witness to prosecute Stephen. The court also likes to say that Stephen should have known this stuff already, or that if the jury knew about it back then, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. Sure, both of those are utterly ridiculous. Let's focus on Thomas Sawinski first. Early in the morning on November 5th, 2005, he was delivering the newspaper to the salvage yard. The road in front of the yard is 147. You turn onto Avery Road and drive straight down to where eventually you would either go forward to what they call the pit, where all the cars are stored, or you turn right to go to either the office or the 3 residences that are along the road. The mailboxes for all the residences are on the left side, and right where you would turn left to go to the office or to Dolores Avery's trailer. Sawinski had just turned onto Avery Road from 147 when he encountered the RAV4 being pushed by 2 guys. The driver's side wasn't wearing a shirt. He couldn't see the one on the passenger side very well. It was dark and they didn't have any headlights on. Sawinski turned right, dropped off the paper, and then turned around. As he got back to the spot where the RAV4 was being pushed and his light shined on the person on the driver's side, he recognized that to be Bobby Dassey. That person looked angry and wanted the car to stop. Sawinski waved him off and said he must go and drove off. What we were told in the last filing is that Sawinski had called the police when he saw on the news about the missing girl and her car. While this should have been enough to get Stephen back into court, it was denied. KZ has more to it now. Her team was able to uncover a recording of when Sawinski called the police to report what he saw. He was told by the person on the phone that they know who did it already. Sawinski thought that was that until years later when he watched Making a Murderer. He doesn't live in the area anymore and didn't follow the case. He had no idea what the alleged evidence was that prosecuted Stephen and Brendan, and knew that what he saw obviously changes the entire narrative. The prior filing had said that Sawinski had tried to contact Stephen's attorneys after watching Making a Murderer and tell them what he knew, but never heard back. Now we know in this current filing that he had emailed the Innocence Project, not Stephen's lawyers, and they did nothing with the information. The KZ team didn't stop there. They talked to the woman who was dating Sawinski at the time. She remembers she was either there on November 5, 2005, when he made the call to report what he saw, or that he told her about it immediately afterwards. When KZ's investigator played the call for her, she recognized Sawinski's voice. A lot of people who don't read the filing or watch my videos going over them don't understand this. But Sawinski did not just do nothing all these years. He reported what he saw at 10:28 p.m. on November 5, 2005, and believed the police just didn't need his information, and that is why they never followed up. He moved to another state and didn't watch Making a Murderer as soon as it came out. But when he did, he reached out to who he thought was handling Steven's case. Eventually, he reached out to KZ when he found out about her. This man has tried time and time again to do the right thing. Now there is evidence in the phone recording of when he called the police and the email he sent to the Innocence Project. There are affidavits from Dean Strang and Jerry Buting and evidence showing they requested all phone calls made to law enforcement about this case and were never given anything about the Sawinski call. Not only that, but part of the call has mysteriously disappeared, and they only have a part of it. Almost like someone tried to scrub it, but didn't do a good job. Back to what Sawinski saw. KZ's investigator interviewed Michael Osmundson on February 16, 2022, and asked him if he was the other person pushing the RAV4 with Bobby Dassey. Mike's response was, "I don't recall." Who says that when you know this is about an allegedly murdered girl's car? If you didn't do it, or even if you did, you would say, "Nope, not me." Or you know what can happen when you talk to people, so you lawyer up. Those are the only acceptable responses, unless, of course, you confess. "I don't recall" is very suspicious. Mike was Bobby's best friend, and he still lives in the area, so they could still be friends today. His other response was, "I don't remember." Also, not good. There are also a ton of phone calls between Bobby and Mike between 3:56 p.m. and 6:02 p.m. on October 31. Explanation for that either. Mike claimed he was out trick-or-treating with his brother and that Bobby often doesn't answer his own phone. That's pretty much all there is this time, which that added to everything else KZ has found out should be more than enough. But alas, sadly, our system is horrible. And this has to first go to the judge who originally ruled on the case, who denies everything before KZ can take it to the court above that one. Now we wait for the state's response, which I think they have 30 days to respond. Then KZ can reply to that, and then we wait for the judge to rule. I'm not sure on the timeline for that, though. As soon as any of it comes out, we do post it on Steven Avery Project, and I will go live to discuss it. Stay tuned. Investigation continues. Hashtag free Steven Avery. Now I will nag my husband to get the cover made, and I can hopefully get this published on Amazon. This small little book I first started working on way back in 2016 may finally get out there so people can read it. As always, investigation continues. October 2022. Here I am on October 9, 2022, writing yet another chapter before releasing this book that I have been writing forever. First, I want to update you on where Steven's case sits now. The state has asked for more time before they respond to Kathleen Zellner's latest motion that has even more proof of Bobby Dassey's guilt and that Manitowoc covered up witnesses and evidence. The court has granted it, and now they have until December 1, 2022 to respond. So the clock marches on, and Steven sits in prison for something he is clearly innocent of. Next, I debated if I should add a chapter on this or not, but since the book is about my experience being an advocate for someone wrongfully accused and the abuse I take, I thought I should put it in here since the book isn't out yet. Another case I had been part of. Oh, nope, I'm not reading that. So that's on the Marnie Yang case. So if you want to read about the Marnie Yang case, get my book on Amazon. There's me and Marnie. And you can read about the Marnie Yang case, as well as I've got lots of videos here of me talking about the Marnie Yang case. So there you go. My whole book is now read. And I have said once I finished reading this on YouTube, then I would start writing the sequel, because those of you who have followed me for a while know that I am back in contact with Steven, and there's been other developments. So, and there's just been other things that has been done to me as an advocate, as well as things happening in my other cases, like just at court today for Marnie Yang. So maybe I'll start writing that. Don't know. But my book is available on Amazon, Wrongfully Abused, Making an Advocate for Steven Avery by me, Jax West. You can search through all the old videos on this YouTube. And then on Facebook, we are Steven Avery Project. We have MAM Gossip Group. And then I have Justice with Jax. Where Are We with Steven? As I always have to close this on Where Are We with Steven? We're waiting for Kathleen to file something on asking for clemency for Steven. So as soon as that's available, we will post it and I will go live to read it and discuss. So now I am going to be off. I took today off to go to court. I've got a little free time before my husband comes home to just go do nothing. But thank you, everybody, for joining me today. And those of you who will watch it later, if you have any information on Steven Avery's case, please reach out to his attorney. Go to her website, KathleenTZellner.com. If you have tried to reach her and she doesn't respond to you, you can send me an email at either official Steven Avery Project at gmail.com or justicewithjax@gmail.com. And I can see if I can get you through to her. But she doesn't always respond to me either. So, and she's a very busy woman. All right, off we go. Investigation continues.